He still remembered the sound of the laughter. It wasn't loud or cruel in an obvious way, but it was sharp enough to carve itself into his memory. It echoed in the classroom the day he stood up to present his idea, hands trembling, voice uneven, eyes filled with hope. He had spent nights preparing that presentation, imagining applause, imagining approval, imagining someone finally saying, "You did well." Instead, when he finished, there was a pause long enough to feel like judgment, and then a few smirks, a whisper, and then that laughter. The teacher cleared her throat and moved on without comment. In that moment, something inside him folded quietly. His name was Ion, and rejection had followed him like a shadow long before that day. He wasn't the smartest student, nor the most athletic, nor the most charming. He was the boy who tried. The boy who stayed up late practicing his speech. The boy who volunteered even when his heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear his own voice. But trying did not always guarantee applause. More often, it invited criticism. At home, things weren't much different. His father believed in toughness. "The world doesn't care about your feelings," he would say whenever Ion came home disappointed. His mother was gentler, but her silence often spoke louder than words. She loved him, but she didn't know how to protect him from a world that seemed determined to test him. By the time he reached college, Ion had learned one important thing: do not expect validation. He joined clubs and left them quietly when he felt invisible. He applied for internships and received rejection emails that began with, "We regret to inform you." He confessed his feelings to a girl he had admired for 2 years, only to hear, "You're a good friend." Each rejection added a layer to the wall he was building around himself. But rejection did something else too. It forced him inward. Instead of arguing with those who dismissed him, he began to observe. Instead of explaining himself to people who misunderstood him, he began to understand himself. The laughter that once haunted him started to transform into fuel. He stopped seeking approval in rooms where he was barely tolerated. He stopped chasing friendships that felt one-sided. He stopped explaining his dreams to those who only saw limitations. His silent comeback did not begin with a dramatic announcement. It began with a decision made alone in his small room one night. He sat at his desk, staring at the rejection email from a company he had dreamed of working for. His chest felt heavy, but his eyes were dry. He had cried too many times before. That night, he didn't cry. He simply whispered to himself, "Noted." And then he opened his laptop and started learning. While others scrolled endlessly through social media, Ion enrolled in free online courses. He watched lectures late into the night, pausing and rewinding until he truly understood. He practiced skills that no one had asked him to develop yet. He built small projects that no one saw. There were no likes, no comments, no applause. Just progress. Months passed. His routine became disciplined. Wake up early. Study. Practice. Work part-time. Study again. Sleep. Repeat. There were days when exhaustion tempted him to quit. There were nights when self-doubt whispered that maybe the laughter had been right. But he had grown tired of quitting. He had grown tired of being the version of himself that gave up. He didn't post about his journey. He didn't announce his goals. He stopped talking about what he would do and focused on what he was doing. The world forgot about him, and for the first time, that felt like freedom. 1 year later, he applied again to the same company that had rejected him. This time, his resume looked different. It wasn't just filled with grades and generic skills. It carried proof, projects completed, certifications earned, real experience gained through freelance work he had quietly taken on. He submitted his application and went back to his routine without obsessing over the outcome. When the interview invitation arrived, he stared at the email for a long moment. His heart pounded the same way it had years ago in that classroom. But this time, the pounding felt different. It wasn't fear. It was readiness. The interview panel asked difficult questions. Instead of panicking, he paused, thought carefully, and answered with clarity. When he didn't know something, he admitted it calmly and explained how he would find the solution. There was no desperation in his voice. No need to impress. Only quiet confidence built from countless unseen hours of preparation. Weeks later, he received the call. "We're pleased to offer you the position." He didn't shout. He didn't run outside to tell everyone. He simply closed his eyes and let the silence absorb the moment. The boy who had once been laughed at had just been chosen. But his comeback was not about a job. It was about transformation. As he began working, he remained the same disciplined person he had become during those silent months. He listened more than he spoke. He delivered work before deadlines. He stayed late not to be noticed, but to improve. Slowly, colleagues who had once overlooked him began to rely on him. Managers started asking for his opinion in meetings. Clients praised his professionalism. Respect did not arrive overnight. It accumulated in small moments. A nod of approval after a presentation. A thank you email from a client. A junior colleague seeking his advice. One afternoon, he was invited to give a talk at a local university about career development. Standing behind the podium, looking at rows of students, he felt a strange sense of déjà vu. It reminded him of that classroom years ago. The laughter, the embarrassment, the folded piece of confidence. This time, when he spoke, his voice was steady. He didn't speak about success as a glamorous destination. He spoke about rejection as a teacher. He told them that sometimes the world doesn't see your value immediately. That sometimes being ignored is a blessing because it gives you space to grow without pressure. He told them that the most powerful comebacks are the ones you don't announce. After the talk, a student approached him and said, "Sir, I feel like no one takes me seriously. Hearing you gives me hope." Ion smiled softly. If only that student knew how deeply he understood those words. As years passed, his career flourished. He started his own company, built on the principles he had learned during his silent rebuilding: discipline, consistency, humility. He hired people not just for talent, but for effort. He remembered what it felt like to be overlooked. He made sure no one in his team felt invisible. One day, he attended a reunion. Faces from his past filled the hall. Some of the same people who had once dismissed him now greeted him warmly. "We always knew you'd do something big," one of them said casually. He didn't correct them. He didn't remind them of the laughter. He simply nodded. Because his comeback was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving himself right. Later that evening, he stepped outside the hall and looked up at the sky. He thought about the boy he used to be, the one who trembled during presentations, who refreshed his inbox hoping for acceptance, who questioned his worth after every rejection. He wished he could go back and tell that boy something important: keep going. They can't see what you're building. Rejection had not destroyed him. It had redirected him. The silence that once felt like isolation had become incubation. And respect, it wasn't demanded. It was earned in the quiet hours when no one was watching. His story was never loud. There were no dramatic confrontations, no viral moments, no public revenge. It was a story of choosing growth over bitterness, discipline over drama, patience over pride. From rejected to respected, his journey was not a straight line. It was a series of small decisions made consistently. It was waking up when motivation was absent. It was studying when distractions were tempting. It was believing when evidence was scarce. People often ask him now, "How did you do it?" He usually answers with a simple sentence: "I stopped trying to be seen and started trying to be better." And that is the truth of his silent comeback. Because sometimes, the loudest victories are the ones no one hears coming.